Welcome to our presentation, a crash course in web archiving and community. I am Anna Kijas from Tufts University, and I'll be co-presenting with Sebastian Majstorovic from the Austrian Center for Digital Humanities and Cultural Heritage, and Quinn Dombrowski from Stanford University. Saving Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online is an initiative coordinated by Quinn, Sebastian, and myself. It has grown into a collective effort with over 1,300 cultural heritage professionals in our project's Slack channel. Our goal is to identify and archive at-risk websites and digital content in Ukrainian cultural heritage institutions during the ongoing Russo-Ukrainian War. After months of accusations from NATO and international communities that Russia was planning to invade Ukraine, Russia launched a full invasion on February 24th, 2022. During the week of the invasion, I was preparing for the annual Music Library Association conference, and as I listened to the reporting about the attack on Ukraine, I started to think of ways in which librarians might be able to help protect digital cultural heritage in Ukraine. I had participated in data rescue efforts in the past and was familiar with the workflow, so I thought that one way in which I could provide assistance was to host a data rescue workshop focused on web archiving music collections. And so I began to share details about this event on Twitter. Meanwhile, several thousand miles away, Sebastian Majstorovic was also expressing concerns about protecting Ukrainian digital cultural heritage, and he responded to one of my tweets, suggesting that we coordinate our efforts. Within a few days, Quinn, Sebastian, and I held a meeting via Zoom and began planning our next steps. We launched Sucho on March 1st, and within a week's time, we had 1,000 people signed up to volunteer. We are prioritizing websites that are hosted on servers within Ukraine, but also .ua domains that may be hosted elsewhere. These websites are from institutions of all sizes, public and private, national libraries and archives, historical societies, music or theater academies, as well as rural museums, monasteries, and churches. The websites may have digitized or born digital content, including photographs, theater records, historical documents, oral histories, material culture, audiovisual representations of living traditions, and more. During the first few weeks of the initiative, we were developing documentation, including tutorials, workflows, instructional videos, and content for the website, as we onboarded our volunteers and trained them to use a variety of web archiving applications and tools. Sebastian will discuss our approaches to web archiving, including the applications and tools that we are using in this initiative.
Thanks, Anna. At Sucho, we have relied on a combination of tools to back up Ukrainian websites. These fall into two categories. First, web archiving software, and second, collaboration tools. Our baseline has been the Wayback Machine of the Internet Archive. All the websites we crawl, we submit first in batch to the Wayback Machine using the Google Sheets batch submission function. Since, however, cultural websites are often very media heavy, interactive, or have complicated navigation structures, we also really like to use the tools of the Web Recorder project to produce high fidelity, waxy web archives. I initially experimented with Web Recorder in my day job to try to archive end-of-life digital humanities projects, and was extremely impressed with its ability to capture complicated digital collections. To coordinate and communicate our volunteers, we use Google Sheets and Slack because many people already have an account with these services. And so the threshold to join is quite considerably low. The heart of our whole project is really our giant Google spreadsheet, where our volunteers claim the tasks they would like to do. You can say what you want about Google Sheets, but it is incredibly resilient. At some point, I saw that more than 130 people were editing the spreadsheet simultaneously, and I think not many collaboration tools can do that. In our workflow to archive Ukrainian cultural heritage websites, we follow roughly 5 steps in our workflow. The first step is discovering links that we would like to archive. These come from user submissions through a Google form. We have some people using Wikidata to discover the websites of cultural heritage institutions that might have been listed on Wikipedia, for example. And we also have some people using domain zone files to look for any kind of website that might be relevant to our mission. In the second step, we try to prioritize these websites. Is the website an important cultural website? Does it contain collections that we would like to preserve? And for example, is it from an at-risk area, let's say from Eastern Ukraine, where there might be a lot of fighting? In the third step, we do a technical triage of sorts. We assess how easy is it to crawl this website? Can we do it automatically using browser tricks and the Wayback Machine? Will someone maybe have to write a custom script? We have people who write custom scrapers if we cannot use a web crawler. Or would someone have to go and actually archive it manually, which using the web recorder tools can be done with the archive page Chrome browser extension, which allows you to, as a user, manually click through a website, and it is actually being recorded as you go through it. And we have had extremely dedicated volunteers who have been doing that for weeks on end, clicking through every single link of a website because it's too hard to crawl automatically. Last but not least, we perform a sort of quality control. There really multilingual volunteers come in who check roughly the content of the web archives we have created, so that we can make sure they are not empty or really the essential parts are missing. This whole effort has now resulted in more than 40 terabytes of data to this date. We have also created more than 4,500 WAXI web archives. And the biggest WAXI file that we have crawled so far actually measures 1.4 terabyte as a single file, which can be played back using the web recorder replay web page tool. And so what infrastructure have we been using to run this crawling effort? Well, we started off with a distributed crowd crawling in Docker containers on the volunteers' devices. As time went on, we were so lucky to get a donated cloud server capacity by some commercial cloud providers. And right now we have also managed to do some cooperations with scientific institutions in Europe and North America who back up our backups and provide cold storage mirrors for them, so we can make sure that everything that we have saved is also safe and replicated across the world. And to talk about how the way forward for Sucho is in terms of volunteers versus institutions, I'll hand over to Quinn.
Hi, I'm Quinn Dombrowski, and for my part of this presentation, I'd like to talk about the role of institutions versus individuals and what we can do moving forward from Sucho. So Sucho has been remarkable in the speed of our response. We were able to almost immediately start archiving websites partly because we didn't go through institutional channels. I made inquiries at Stanford University, where I work, about using our web archiving infrastructure, but it was clear that this would take a lot of time, a lot of meetings, a lot of planning, and those were things that were not possible given the speed of the response that was needed. And people have the ability to just go out and do things. Sebastian just went out and bought a server. He bought a domain name, and we built a website. And these are things that you can't do in an institution. You can't just go do things. And this is a good thing. These sorts of emergency response projects need both nimble tents and bunkers. We need people to sort of run out there and start gathering things and respond to the urgency of the moment. But we also need institutions that, even if they ramp up more slowly, will be there more stably in the long term. I've sort of told people when they've asked that, if Sucho incorporates as a nonprofit organization, we will have failed. That's just not what it is. That's not what it's doing. And what we need to do is to be able to pass off this work and the longer term preservation and the longer term relationships, to institutions that are able to, preserve these materials in the long term and continue this conversation. Emergency web archiving is like making molotov cocktails. It's an inspiring story, people going out into the plaza in Kyiv with their beer bottles and their hand sanitizer in the early days of the war. But fundamentally, both molotov cocktails and emergency web archiving projects like Sucho point to a failure of infrastructure. If it comes to molotov cocktails or a bunch of random people throughout the world coming together to archive websites, then something has gone terribly wrong. And I think what we need to think about more broadly as a community is, libraries and archives as a kind of digital Baustellen, this archive of microfilm mostly in the Black Forest in Germany that, preserves cultural heritage for the long term, even in case of disasters. What can we do to build this for the digital as well? And what we'd like to see coming out of this is a proactive network of mutual web archiving. What if we paired, institutions and organizations and countries sort of like a sister city model, where everyone has a partner, and once a year they work together to make sure that there's a backup of their most important cultural heritage materials in a safe place in another country in case of a natural disaster, a war, or something else. And this has the opportunity to build relationships between cultural heritage workers. Just like in the sister city model, people get to know each other, people get to know one another's culture and holdings, and be advocates for those things in their own local context. And what if we made Web Archiving Week an international celebration? What if we made that the one time a year where we all get together and do our kind of mutual web archiving? What if we made it a global conversation and also put these tools in our local community's hands? My 8-year-old son has really enjoyed archiving Ukrainian websites using Browsertrix Cloud. These are things that retirees can do, that children can do. We can make this not just an ivory tower thing inside, our libraries and our universities. We could bring this out to the people. We could say, we have made an agreement that we are responsible for this collection and they are responsible for us. And we're going to, this week, make sure that we have a safe copy of all their things. Come join us in this work. And I think we need to start these conversations now. It's too late for Ukraine, and given the pace of these conversations and these decisions and these organizations, even if mediated by something like UNESCO, it's probably going to be too late for the next war, and it might be too late for the war after that. But it might not be too late for the war 3 wars down the line. These things are going to keep happening, and we can't pretend that they're not. So we need to start these discussions and plan for a future where there can be more proactive web archiving so that there's less work that's needed in an emergency. Thank you.